The next agenda item this evening is going to be presented by Dr. Merrigan, one of our coaches. We have an instructional coach, which is Dr. Merrigan, and she is a .6 instructional coach, which means she works 3 days a week for grades K through 8. And then we have Dr. Joy Turpey, who used to be our assistant superintendent. She works .4, but she's not here this evening. I've asked Dr. Merrigan to come this evening to talk about our instructional coach role, how it's embedded into the school day, their collaboration, their data collection, their close work with myself as the curriculum and development and professional development person in the district. I think it's a different model that a lot of people may not know about that we have in the Hull Public Schools, and it's great that we have two very highly qualified individuals that are our instructional coaches and have built very trusting relationships with our teachers, which is important to move this work forward, to move the performance of our students forward. So Dr. Merrigan, if you would present, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me tonight. I spoke with Joy today. She was unable to join us tonight, but our remarks tonight were collaborative in nature and creating them, and I think it really conveys the spirit of our work together. I'd like to begin by saying that it is a progressive and forward-thinking model that we have in place here, and it would not be in place if it weren't for the trust that Dr. Terrell and Mrs. Keene has put in us, along with our building principals who work so collaboratively with us, and also our instructional staff that has entrusted us with opening up their practice and looking very deeply at their work every day with students. So our position in the school system is sort of wedged between the administrative level of the school department and the instructional staff. We don't have supervisory or evaluative responsibility, so we simply just get to help people be better. And that's really what we do every day with the instructional staff. The two main domains that we work off of are school data, student data, and curriculum. So those two domains are interfacing all the time, and we look deeply at both of those with the school staff. On the administrative side, most of our collaborative efforts with the administration revolve around big picture things like district determined measures, Title I compliance data, PARCC and MCAS data. On the instructional staff side, we're looking at Common Core state standards, formative assessments that teachers are using with students, and certainly issues of daily practice, so that consultative role with teachers around issues of daily practice. In year one of our work together, we really looked at infrastructure. How are we going to collect data? How are we going to look at data with our staff? Our curriculum maps reflective of what's really happening in our classrooms and gaining some continuity around that. We had a lot of really rich discussions with the instructional staff around equity, equitable instruction, making sure that all of our kids in the school system are receiving an equitable education, meaning that across certain classrooms you see similar experiences at a particular grade level. It's really bringing that continuity to the instructional program. Because if we're collecting data on students, we want to know that they're having equal experiences in classrooms. We also took a hard look at our large data groups like MCAS and looked at trends across kids and groups of kids. In year two, we're actually convening with more and smaller groups with staff by grade level. The building principals were gracious to allow us the time. At the Jacobs Elementary School, we meet with each grade level every 3 weeks. And at the middle school, we meet on a rotating basis by content area. Every third week, we see each content area group of teachers. And in those meetings this year, we're looking more at individual practice and grade level practice. So teachers are bringing samples of student work. We're analyzing that and seeing where we can make some improvements for outcomes with kids. On the Title I side, we collect all of the Title I data 5 times a year. So at 5 different benchmark points, we are collecting data on those children that are most at risk in our school district, and we're looking very carefully at that data and trends over time, and also making instructional shifts right there in those data meetings and decisions about how we're going to instruct kids. We also consult on the special education side, both with the special education director and with our special ed staff. Again, looking at student groupings, looking at instructional models, and making decisions about how we're going to instruct students based on data. The model itself is built around building capacity among your instructional staff. So we want teachers over time to be able to do all of this work independently. But the coaching model really provides them a venue, an opportunity to bounce their ideas off of us, to consult with us around problems of practice, to open up their practice. I mean, historically, teaching has been a fairly isolated and individual type of practice. Opening it up to other people and sharing those things that you might be struggling with allows you to move forward and do a better job. And without the evaluative piece, we have that relationship with the instructional staff. So we've really been able to make a lot of inroads around things that people might be struggling with in terms of decisions with kids. When we look at the Common Core, those shifts, the standards are calling for subtle but distinct shifts from a sort of a content-based instruction to a skill-centric instruction. So the teachers will often come to us and say, I'm tweaking this lesson and I really want it to be more standards focused. Can you just take a look at it with us and let us know what you think? And then we might send somebody in to do a model lesson for them. If it's a reading class, we might send one of our reading specialists in to do a model lesson for a classroom teacher and sort of model how that should look. It's an evolving model. So as we build trust with the staff, we're hoping that we can boil it down to a more individual type model where we're meeting more one-on-one with teachers and actually going in and perhaps observing teachers, building in the peer evaluation process, really looking at each other's practice. But it's building over time. This is just year 2. And the bottom line is that we want this to have tremendous impact on student outcomes. That's why we're doing it. And we feel as though we have an excellent handle now on achievement trends within our K-8 program. We can definitely speak to how kids are achieving on the reading and math side in the moment. We can tell you about where any student is based on our data, which we want. And we can work with staff in a very sort of real-time mode, helping them make decisions on a daily basis about their classrooms. Any questions?
I will open it up. Dr. Merrigan, thank you so much.
Yep, thanks.
I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you talk about at-risk youth, what type of at-risk are we looking at?
So these would be kids that would be at risk for any achievement issues at all.
But this is non-special education. This is outside of
It
that.
could be special ed students. Yep, we definitely consult on different cases with special ed students. I mean, we look at 3 variables: time, instructional model, and personnel. So if something isn't going well, or we're not pleased with an outcome in terms of data, we will change one of those variables. And we're teaching the staff to do that on their own, to not let something go on and not be successful, to use one of those variables and make a change.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. And the other thing I had, I'm a dinosaur. You know, I taught a million years ago, and the comfort level of having someone come into my classroom, it wasn't there if I didn't trust the person. So how are you guys doing with that? Is that improving, or are you being accepted more? I know it's only the 2nd year.
Right. We were humbled and definitely thrilled with the level of acceptance from the get-go. I think that this is something that teachers have wanted because the job has become so much more complex and, of course, high stakes, as we all know. And so the collaborative decision-making, the sort of we're in this together, we're all tethered to each other, has never been more apparent. You know, when you look at the PARCC test for grade 5, you know, we want the first grade teachers to see that because work that they're doing to lay the foundation for achievement in grade 5, we're all tethered to each other in that way. So that's what we've been building with the staff, that this is a shared journey, more so now than ever, I believe. And so they've welcomed the opportunity to have this venue in which to work with us, and the principals have been phenomenal about opening up that to us.
Great, great, that's good to hear. Where shall I start?
Go with Michelle.
Michelle, I'll start with you.
All right. I've definitely seen it evolve. When I go to parent-teacher conferences, it used to be, oh yeah, my son's doing fine. Education is not what it used to be. I've seen it change also, and now they're saying, well, on the pretest he got 30%, but now he's at the level of 70%, and it's all data-based, so you know. Can you just talk about the differentiation, because that was something that was really cited in the DESE report that
Right.
is one of
So
our goals.
again, in that's definitely an area that Joy and I have identified as a focus. We really want to help the staff get to the level of differentiation within the classroom that will allow, really sort of open up the opportunity for all kids to achieve. And in the beginning stages of differentiated instruction, teachers might think that differentiation means just having different things for kids to do. And in its infancy, it looks like just different groups of kids. But really fine-tuning that instructional model requires a great deal of collaboration between the grade level itself in deciding what are the needs of the kids. But you can't really understand what to differentiate unless you understand the needs of the students in your class. So our work has been laying that foundation with them. Who are your students? Where are they on the continuum for this grade level, for these skills? And how are you going to move everyone along? I think that one of the things that we've really asked the staff to do is to look deeply at their work, their lesson plans, what they're bringing forward, and come to us with those plans to help. We will help them with the differentiation piece. The other thing that's really critical is the collaboration between special ed teachers and regular ed teachers in the classroom. That model is so critical. If it's not a co-teaching model, if there isn't that shared responsibility for the kids, it doesn't optimize the learning in the classroom. We know that. It's so easy to say, it's so much more difficult to execute. So we're really working on that with the staff. We've definitely seen an improvement. And their conversations are more around data too. When you put the data on the table between two practicing teachers, it's like a light goes on and they realize where they need to go with the kids. You can't make the trip, make the journey without having that baseline data on each of your students. And then as they change over time, what am I going to change in my teaching to respond to that? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely difficult, but we've had such openness on the part of the staff to work with us on this that I think you're going to see, and that's great to hear, Michelle, that you're actually having a parent conference that is centered around data. That makes me happy because that's where we want our staff to be.
And it's on the middle school. It's up the middle school.
Yeah.
Eric?
Guys, do you have an opinion on sort of the difference of the impact of the MCAS versus the PARCC? I mean, we've had MCAS for years past. This will be the first year we have PARCC in this district except for the high school. Do you see that as fundamentally changing anything, or is it just, what's your idea?
Well, I think that, we're going to learn something. We'll learn a lot of valuable things when we see the results of the PARCC testing. I wouldn't want to be a kid right now taking those. But at the same time, I'm very confident that we have done some significant work on the professional development side with teachers, and this coaching model has really sort of alleviated some of the anxiety around making the appropriate curriculum shifts, getting very standard-centered, that skill-centric thinking. So it's not really about content. Content is still important, but the skill is what you're teaching, and really getting the teacher skill-centric in their teaching. And you know what? The results will be what the results are. Our internal data right now is extremely hopeful, and at some future meeting, Joy and I would love to come and share with you some of our data. Maybe in June, come out and share what we've learned this year, and bring a couple of our staff members to talk about what it's been like to make that shift to the Common
from
Core.
last year that you can share also, so we can
Before
the comparison.
We have a lot of data.
Yeah, we do.
Can you explain that though, Mary, about the skill-centered as opposed to the content? I know.
Right.
Just-
I mean, I happen to feel as though the Common Core is sort of streamlining and simplifying our work. With all the criticism out there, the one thing I can say is that it really gives us a focus. And it also clarifies in a huge way what each grade level is expected to have kids prepared for to pass them on to the next level. And I was happy to see that there were some skills, particularly on the reading side, that were traditionally, say, 3rd grade skills that are now moved up to 4th or 5th grade, that are no longer, you know, something, because in developmentally it was never appropriate, so I was gratified to see that. I think for instance, one of the things that, you know, we see as a trend in the Common Core is that teachers are asked to have children make comparisons across text about a particular topic or some literary device of some sort. In the past, I might have read an entire novel because I love that novel, and we've always taught that novel in my grade level. But now, I may have to take an excerpt of that novel in order to work in other literary pieces to push the skill, to make the kids competent at the skill rather than the content. Now, that's not to say we don't want kids reading whole novels. Of course we do. But we may have to, at the instructional level in that class, make that decision. And we had some excellent discussions with our 6 through 12 ELA teachers during some PD around that issue. And, you know, as teachers, we're sort of, we're curriculum hoarders, so we hold on to things. And so the Common Core is asking us to let go of some things at the benefit of gaining the ability to work more on skills than content. Is that clear?
I get it.
You know?
We're all glad we're back, not back in school.
I know, it's hard.
Kind of exciting.
Yeah, teacher accountability and student accountability is like the whole shift. It's totally different now. It really is.
It is, and I think with this model, with the coaching, it's given some comfort to the teaching staff, and it's also given them some confidence and the ability to be a little more vulnerable in their practice and to work with us around improving. I would have loved to have had a coach when I was teaching middle school. It would have been an awesome resource. But, you know, we feel as though the staff is completely accessing us. Would you guys agree with that, the principals? Would you?
I think it's been a big shift for all of the teachers because usually you spend a lot of time with your own grade, but now it's really opened up where people are talking across grade and they're looking at the work the other grades are doing. So it's a much healthier way of looking at what we do. It's been very effective.
And in some ways, Joy and I are a conduit to all the resources, because if we see somebody with a particular problem, but we know somebody else in the K-8 system that could help with that problem, we can connect people. Or if we know somebody is particularly comfortable with a set of standards, Common Core standards, and they sort of fine-tuned a unit of study around that, and somebody else is having less comfort with that, we can pair those people up for a model lesson. It's really about that, strengthening the entire system of instruction in a very systematic way.
Dr. Merrigan, could I also ask, you said this is year 2 of this program. How do you see this evolving in years 3 and 4? Is it just continuing fine-tuning, or is it going to shift again?
I mean, Joy and I joke, we'll know we've done a great job when we work ourselves out of a job. So there are very specific adult development goals embedded in our work with the instructional staff. I want to see that in year 2, teachers are actually doing some things on their own that we modeled for and with them last year. For instance, last year we would meet with the groups of teachers and we would literally collect the data, put it up on our whiteboards, shift around some groups, make some decisions about what the instructional approach was going to be, look at scheduling. Now, in year 2, instead of that step, they simply come to us with proposed groups, instruction, and times, in terms of how much time students may need with something, and they make a proposal to us around it and give us their rationale. So they've progressed from needing us to really heavily model that with them to being able to do that piece on their own. Again, in year 3 or 4, well, next year, you know, Judy and I have talked a lot about, you know, really maybe working towards that pure peer coaching model where we're really looking at each other's practice with the coach. So if I go with David to look at Stephanie's classroom, we go together to look for something that maybe David needs to work more on or David wants to see done in the classroom. And then we debrief the 3 of us together around that. Again, you're building the capacity of and actually facilitating collaboration that then should become sort of automatic and culturally normed within your organization. What does this gain you? Well, I've heard school committee members lament many times that changes in leadership sort of send the school district into a tailspin. When you build these competencies into your instructional staff, it doesn't matter who comes and goes. These are the norms of how we do things. This is how we look at students. This is how we work together. This is our language, and this is what we do. And, you know, your leadership will add to that. However, we will not fall apart because we've had a change in leadership. And I think it's a significant strength in knowing that, you know, right now the average life of an administrator in a school is 3 to 5 years. It's a reality that we should build against, not lament about because, you know, it happens, because it will happen. Not that I want to live with without any of you, but, you know, it is a way to strengthen your organization in a way that ensures against that. And Dennis, you know, you made a point. Why do people leave? It's things like this that actually retain people, knowing that those supports are in place and that we can and will support the people that come to work here in this ever-evolving complex work. Judy?
David, did you have a question?
No, not really. I think it's a great job. How often are you at the schools? Are you there a couple days a week, 4 days a week, 5?
Well, basically you get a 2-for-1 with Joy and I. I mean, we basically share a position. And I give a lot of credit. I mean, the upper administration has a lot of discretion around how they use grant money. I think they've made a significant statement by investing in this model, at least for the short term. And, you know, I've watched under Judy's leadership a real effort and commitment to embedded professional development for teachers, long-term, repeated, revisiting topics, none of this, you know, hit and run sort of PD. This model is a form of professional development. It is a daily, yearly commitment to developing adults in your buildings.
One comment that in our district, you participated in our district review when they interviewed people in December of 2013. And in the report, they talked about how we needed to increase our professional development, assessment, curriculum, and instruction 6 through 12. And so this is a perfect example as to what we have done. And we would love to increase the position so that you were here every day and Joy was here every day, but right now it is funded through the Title I grant, and we tie it to that, and the work has been invaluable as far as the benefit our students and teachers have gotten from it.
Well, thank you.
It's just great.
Yeah, it's been great working with all of you. And, you know, we had the opportunity, by nature of the fact that we interface with so many aspects of the school district, we spent a lot of time with the visiting committee, and we talked, they were very in favor of a coaching model. They know that it's sort of a progressive, forward-thinking model that's out there. It's been in business for a long, long time. It's one of the things that can sort of transfer from business over to the school world, and they were pretty excited to know that this was in place. They understood it was only our first year. They understood what our priorities were in terms of building that infrastructure so that we would have a sort of a perfect canvas to start working with the adults in the building.
So they interviewed after 4 months. You'd only been doing it for 4 months.
Yep.
John, did you have a question?
I do. I'll try to wrap it up in like one kind of close, larger question. Is this, are you spending somewhat equal amount of time in the 3 different schools? Are you spending, is it selective teachers or is it all
Everybody.
teachers?
It's everyone K-8. sort of the epicenter of our work originated in the Jacob School because we oversee all the Title I data collection, and we have a critical mass of our Title I kids are situated in the Jacobs Elementary School. We are in the middle school. We're increasing our time there, working with Tony's staff. And obviously the two buildings are very different because they're serving very different populations of kids. But we have had equal levels of, sort of open door policy in both buildings with a real spirit of everybody wanting to do better. And
can you make the intellectual jump that says, I've been doing it K through 8? What happens to the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who are coming into school? Will they see a growing professionalism within the teaching base there, or are you going to kind of hit a wall that says, I've been teaching these guys and I haven't?
I can understand why you would ask that question. I will say this. Our high school, I think, is pretty awesome. We don't have a sort of a weekly time that we meet with Mike's staff. However, there have been multiple occasions that we've consulted with Mike about transition issues from grade 8 to grade 9. And we have another meeting that's coming up where we'll look at some Ready Step data with him and try to understand, and with Tony, are there things we could be doing as part of that 8 to 9 transition to head off any issues that come up with kids. And also to increase dialogue among the teaching staff that services those two grades. I mean, we're small enough that we can do a great deal. We really, the power of this district is the size. It really is. You don't feel like you're turning around the Titanic in the harbor every time you go to make a change or make a recommendation.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, I know you've only been doing this for 2 years, you said, but have you seen any increase in, say, ACT scores or MCAS scores?
I would say that the last place you're going to see the benefit of any time that we've spent with teachers is at the standardized test level. Unfortunately, it is the one thing that gets in the paper. And it is the one thing that's, realtors like to talk about. However, I will tell you that our internal data, our formative assessments that we're looking at with teachers, as well as our data collection 5 times out of the year with our kids that we're most concerned about, and the September, and of course in June we'll collect more data, the DDM, that is the district determined measure that's required by the state. We see really promising things. And I would, I'd like to say that we have some part in that, but I think really the real influence on that is the fact that teachers are being given the time to actually look carefully at student outcomes and to make some adjustments and shifts around that. If you said to teachers, you can have one thing, what's your number one thing that you want? And this would persist across many settings, they'd say time. They don't have the time. But the building principals have been great about scheduling that in, and we've been able to sort of throttle them back. We've collected a lot of data, and we're able to look at it with the teachers, analyze it, and make some decisions that have actually resulted in some pretty immediate achievement gains.
I guess I'm wondering, how do you measure your performance?
Well, we have multiple measures that we use with kids. So my performance personally?
No, the performance of the effect of the literacy coaches on the students.
Well, I think that we're probably going to compare last year's data to this year's data, both our, reading assessments and our math assessments. I think that I know that Joy and I plan to circulate a survey with the entire K-8 staff and ask them what's the benefit of us in your lives, in your professional lives.
You also mentioned 5 times you're meeting with the benchmark.
Yes, well, we have
Individual
benchmark,
results
but
on every student.
it's difficult to tie that back to me personally or to Joy. It's more about, are we seeing changes in practice that are resulting in better student achievement? And I can say right now, yes.
I just want to interject. I think Mary's being kind in that this is year 2 of this literacy
Joy was
coach.
doing literacy coaching before.
Right. Joy and Mary have kind of been at this for the past 5 years.
Well, Joy was the literacy coach for the last
Yeah.
several years.
I mean, I've been in the mix. Yep.
As far as helping with the kids with literacy, and we've seen the scores, I mean, primarily at the beginning, we're focused at the Jacob School. We've seen sort of those scores overall jump at that level. It's become a level 1 school. So I think that although this is we're in year 2 of this model,
Formal.
that Joy and Mary have been in the classrooms, they've been working on this type of model, and have really just formalized it this year or last year, through the budget process to make some significant inroads. It's really culture, and, changing the culture of the way we do business and how we did it, and, it wasn't successful, and now, this model appears to be working from the data that we have.
Right. Right.
Yes, John?
Yeah, kind of a broad type question, but are you seeing the younger graduates coming into the teaching profession, are they more attuned to this than they have been in the past?
Yeah.
So their learning curve to what you're trying to accomplish is less when they come, or is this?
Right. So
that?
yes and no. I will say that the teacher preparation programs now are far more centered on data-driven decisions in schools. Having said that, I'll also say that you still have the issue of a teacher coming out of a teacher prep program, so the theoretical world, into the practical world of, here I am in a classroom with 20 kids that are so different, and I can flip through my handbook of excellent teaching and I'm still going to be having some difficulty in addressing the needs of all those kids. I mean, the good news is we're including more kids than we ever have in the history of education. The difficult part of that is making sure that we're resourced in a way that we can actually meet the needs of all those kids that we're including. And as Stephanie said, there are cultural types of settings that you have to create in terms of assumptions about kids and learning, values and beliefs about what education is. And we could, with just the number of people in this room right now, could have an extremely diverse discussion around that. And our capacity to really make a difference in kids' lives every day. We've been in meetings with teachers where they've brought forth concerns about students, real complicated situations with kids coming to school that may or may not be ready to learn in the same way as the student next to them. How do we move them beyond that and help them to understand that despite all that, they can still make a difference in this student's life? And how do we show them that? With our data that we collect with them. And that's where we get the buy-in and the opportunity to move forward with our instructional staff. Hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
The most wonderful thing about the coaching model is that they are taking the data 5 times a year, so that teachers don't do the same instruction all year long with their students. It's not working, they change it. They take data, it's not working, they change it. So when you asked about the outcomes, we have on every single student, K through 8, we have reading data on them, so we know individually if their students are improving or not. And if we didn't have the coaches, we may not have made that shift. We may not have talked about, okay, we need to instruct Mary differently, or we need to get this type of strategy in there for Judy to do that. So there's a lot of data. So
Judy,
thank
you have data right on to the actual questions, like how many students got that particular question right.
Right, we have benchmarks where they're supposed to be. Yep. And then according to the benchmark, what the kind of intervention level they're going to need. So
The feedback's right there. Good, thank you so much.
very good.
I think just one of the things through the budget process that we've talked about is, and that we would love to get, is a math instructional coach. Because obviously this seems to be working for literacy. We've seen the scores kind of jump. So I think that that's always been a priority of the board to try to implement this with
And Mary has
success.
been doing that
Right.
she's been working on the math data, the district determined measures there and with teachers, so.
Good.
Laying the groundwork.